As many of you know, today we're going to have a conversation, a community conversation on vaping.
Good evening, how's everybody doing? Thank you so much for being here. I'm Dani.
And I'm Jeni.
And we are from Stearns County Public Health, and we're here to kind of facilitate and have a community conversation with you guys addressing the youth vaping epidemic. So as you know, we see this, we hear this in classrooms, buses, locker rooms, bathrooms, you name it. And so it's important to kind of know what it is, what the risks are, but also how to have those conversations.
So Dani and I, we work on the Statewide Health Improvement Partnership Grant. We are funded through the Minnesota Department of Health, and all counties in Minnesota have this grant. And so our overall focus is to create healthier communities in Minnesota and across Stearns County. And so our three areas that we focus on are healthy eating, physical activity, and tobacco prevention. And so we do that, we partner and collaborate with schools and work sites, healthcare clinics, nonprofit groups, and we all come together and we kind of work on those three areas. In tobacco, so we work on policy change because we know that is sustainable. So we work with cities, we work within the county, we work with work sites, we work on parks for tobacco-free environments, and we look at data. And so we collect data every 2 years, and we go in and we do tobacco audits on all the retailers that sell tobacco in Stearns County. And we will look at pricing, we will look at promotion, advertising, and we take that data, we enter it, and then we can kind of look at the trends from year to year and see where our focus needs to be.
So as Jeni said, we do the Minnesota Youth Tobacco Survey, and so this is conducted by the Minnesota Department of Health, who sustains our grant, and we do it every couple of years. And what that tells us is what is going on in other schools, because what we want to know is what is the difference between metro and rural areas. As you guys can kind of imagine, we see differences in schools from St. Cloud to Holdingford to Melrose, Sauk Center, Paynesville. So it's really important to address the needs that are there and have the conversations a little bit differently. In 2017, we saw a significant jump from 2015, 2014, and 2013. 2014 was the first year that the Surgeon General actually declared this a youth epidemic, specifically because we saw a 50% jump in the data that we looked at. A couple of those correlating factors or characteristics we look for is what are students using? How often? What is their perception of tobacco? And then also, what is that lack of perceived harm associated with vaping? If you can imagine, we ask students if they smoke or not. Typically the answer is no. We then ask, do you vape or use e-cigarette products? Sometimes the answer is yes. And so they don't even consider or associate that with smoking. So when we look at the overall student survey, we know that grades 6 through 12 have really kind of a narrow focus, and that use is continuing to go up and up. And we'll talk a little bit about through some of the data we'll share with you tonight. The good news is that traditional tobacco is down, right? The problem here is you'll see significant jumps in the e-cigarettes. And so in 2011, we saw about 1.5%, and that gradually started to increase through the evolution of these devices. And so if you can imagine, we're almost, 4 generations in, and so a lot of that work has really erased the prevention that we've done. So we saw a jump in 2014, and those are the middle gray bars here. And so in 2019, we saw an additional 27.5% on top of that 50%. So what that means is 80% or higher of individuals in high school and middle school are using regularly. And how we categorize individuals as regular smokers is that they use or vape 3 to 5 times a week, at least once a day. So like I said, the vaping industry has really erased the last 10 years or so of tobacco prevention that we've done. The cessation is different, the risks are different, but also that lack of perception is different. So all e-cigarettes contain nicotine, whether they disclose it or not. All products out there that have been tested by the FDA that have been listed as nicotine-free contain at least 1% of nicotine. And also too, when we look at some of the evidence-based research out there, we also ask students one, where they get them, and have they ever been peer pressured into using or trying them? And we know that this is significant because it only takes 1 or 2 times for that addiction to occur.
So there's a large term called ENDS, so most e-cigarettes fall under this umbrella term in the electronic nicotine delivery systems, but we usually will hear them called e-cig, e-cigarettes, vapes, Juul, dab pens. But as you can kind of see, Dani talked a little bit about the evolution. So you can see first generation, they looked like traditional cigarettes. They were disposable, so they were one-time use. Then they moved into second generation. They got a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier. They became refillable and rechargeable with e-juices. Third generation is a mod system, and we do have some examples of these up front here. And so the cartridge is larger, so it holds more juice, and it is rechargeable as well. The fourth generation is what we're seeing currently, and those are mod pods. And so that's the Juul and the Soren drops, Soren airs, and so those are rechargeable, and they come with pods that you can be purchased and usually flavored. So this is just an infographic of kind of what's in a backpack. And so if you're in school and students have their backpacks, or at home and your student has their backpack, what are you looking for? And so a lot of the devices look like everyday school supplies, office supplies. So there's some that resemble flash drives, there's some that resemble pens or highlighters, whiteout tape. And so if you're not sure what you're looking for, it can be really challenging to decide what is what. Packaging for some of the cigarillos, small cigars, they resemble like fruit roll-ups or candy bars, and so that color scheme is very similar when it comes to packaging, so it can be very tricky to see the difference.
So this is very significant because we know, based on the survey data and a variety of other characteristics in which we ask youth about use, 1/3 of students actually use these devices for recreational marijuana use. And unfortunately, when individuals are more likely to participate or use, we start to see them using CBD oil with THC, synthetic drugs, and then transitioning into even heroin, which is very, very unfortunate. So we want to make sure that there are some sort of regulation, and it comes from these community conversations that make that happen. Again, increased risk of addiction to tobacco and other drugs, and nicotine is considered a gateway drug.
So nicotine is highly addictive, and it is more addictive to our youth. And so once they start smoking, that smoking initiation, it changes their brain chemistry, which then impairs their memory, their attention span, and their learning ability. And so this addiction can happen very quickly. It can happen within a couple of tries of smoking, or it can take up to a month depending on the device that's being used, the level of nicotine in the pod, how often and how long they're taking that hit. They are 2 times more likely to transition to traditional tobacco as well. And then again, with that brain chemistry, it changes and it becomes easily addictable to other drugs and alcohol as well. Some more data from the survey that was done recently is, where are our youth getting their e-cigarettes? And so as you can kind of see, most of them are getting them from their friends across the board in 8th, 9th, and 11th grade. It ranges from 71 up to 76% that it is kind of a sale from student to student. Those bought at vape shops are reasonably low. Usually you have to be 18 to 21 to enter a vape shop. So they are adult-only shops. And then bought online is about 8 to 9%. And that is getting more challenging to purchase online. Some sites have added a second verification when it comes to not just clicking a box anymore. Like you sometimes will have to add the last 4 of your social to verify that you are of age to purchase.
So as Jeni talked a little bit about flavorings, we'll kind of do a deep dive with a little bit more specific, but really when the flavors were entered into the market, tobacco corporations said that flavorings were needed to actually transition traditional smokers to e-cigarettes, which were deemed a healthier form of tobacco use, or to quit. And so really, when we have conversations with students, with parents, there is a little bit of an argument behind e-cigarette use, specifically because it has been deemed healthy. And really, any time that you say something is a healthier alternative, it's going to have a little bit of a hook for some populations. So the first one is that e-cigarettes have been proven safe and effective as a form of tobacco cessation, which we know is not true. In surveying adult tobacco users, we know that most adult users are dual users and they've never fully switched off of traditional cigarettes. The second one is that it's just water vapor, or there's no nicotine, it's just juice. And we know that with water, as humans, we can't breathe underwater, so we typically ask students, could you even vape water? Which we know is not the case. So it's physically impossible, but again, just having that conversation. When we talk about nicotine independence, it is true that individuals are 2 times more likely to transition into traditional tobacco use and then also transition through to using other gateway drugs. But then when we talk about side effects of nicotine, there are a variety of adverse health effects that we're concerned about as far as risk. So when we think about the blood, the lungs, gastrointestinal issues, we're talking about joint pain in 14 to 16-year-olds. We're talking a little bit about the central nervous system. Jeni talked about the brain chemistry, but it also comes down to the construction of these devices. And so when we talk about the heart and the lungs working together, the issue here is that a lot of conditions associated with vaping are irreversible. So unlike traditional tobacco, an individual may be able to quit cold turkey, or they might go through a tobacco cessation program. With the chemicals that are being vaped, that most individuals are using, that are unregulated on the market, the body is not able to bounce back from that. And so you actually need very heavily prescriptive drugs over a long period of time to help the body regulate itself for simple functions like breathing. So if you look at the top right here, on the top from A to B and then below that B to C, this is a scan of a 13-year-old female who came in presenting of asthma-like symptoms. An athlete, great student, and was asked if she used tobacco. The first answer was no. Chest x-rays and a couple of different blood tests came back. They asked her if she used e-cigarettes, and she said yes. She used over that 3 to 5 day a week threshold, so she was considered a regular smoker. They tracked her for 30 days, and as you can see from the top to the bottom here, the darkening and the swelling of the lungs. So what happens is when individuals are vaping these products and chemicals, it actually damages the air sacs in the lungs, which help us exchange that carbon dioxide and oxygen process. We also have microfibers on our lungs that are being significantly damaged and cannot be repaired. The bottom image here is about popcorn lung. How many of you guys have heard about that in the news as trends have come out? And so popcorn lung, it's called Bronchiolitis Obliterans. And what happens is those sacs actually split and they look like popcorn. And so again, if you can imagine the irreversible symptoms, individuals are having to take medication from 14 to 16 and on for the remainder of their lives just to have consistent oxygen airflow. So it is very, very dangerous, and it comes down to the construction of the device, the chemical, the addiction with the nicotine. At first, when we started to see trends in severe lung injuries, a lot of individuals were saying, oh, well, I just vape nicotine, I don't use CBD oil with or without THC. I think a lot of reporting in the news, we're talking mostly about individuals mixing chemicals with THC and nicotine, but we know that every case that's been reported to the Minnesota Department of Health, they're all different. Some individuals are only doing CBD, some individuals are doing CBD with THC, nicotine, e-salt, or juice, and potentially other synthetic drugs. So every case has been different, and when we look at surveys, we know that 70% of those individuals that report cases of severe lung injuries are male. The reason why that happens is because males are more likely to participate in risky behavior, and then 80% of the patients were under 35 years old. Of that group, 16% were under 18. And so basically what that means is, again, it really speaks true to the data that we're finding, that youth are considered replacement smokers. Have you guys heard that term before? So what big tobacco is basically doing is that once generations get older or once individuals die off from the #1 preventable disease in America, They want to get youth addicted, so by the time that they are able to purchase, they are regular users.
There are products on the market currently that make it easy to access e-cigarettes, and so there's a product line out there called Vaporware. They have sweatshirts and they have long sleeve t-shirt material, they have hats, they have backpacks. And so all you do is you pretty much would connect your device and you're able to vape hands-free. There's different jewelry options. So there's necklaces, there's watches that resemble Fitbits or Apple Watches. You know, the face just pops out and that's your device. And like just even the packaging, like they make it really small, they make it very sleek, so it is easy to hide, and so it'll easily fit into a nice little clutch, or it'll fit into just a container of something else, just to hide it as well.
If you look in the middle here, this colorful image, those are Bud vapes, and they actually broke the market just a couple of years ago. And remember when I said when anything is considered healthy, it really does pull in a particular population. And so individuals were looking to vape essential oils and vitamins. And so if you look closely, you can see that this individual is a young boy that they're using for marketing and advertising. And so the FDA does actually, they regulate flavoring, but not for vaping. So they regulate flavoring for taste and food consumption, but not the actual flavor. So we're starting to see individuals use these younger and younger because there may be associated conditions with behavioral risk and things like that. However, they are very unsafe. The second piece here is we talked a little bit about the construction of the device. So there are over 1,000 devices that exist and over 15,000 different flavorings on the market. And so if you look here, you have the mouthpiece. And so with the mouthpiece, it's directly connected to the e-cell or juice or the fillable cartridge. And so we're starting to see a lot of decalcification of teeth, and we're also seeing a lot of mouth sores and oral cancer associated with that. Moving through to the right there, you have the heating mechanism and then onto the battery. The challenge with this is a couple of things. As an individual sucks on the device, number one, mucous membranes are exposed and damaged by the chemicals that are being vaped. But then two, that coil or that heating mechanism is actually leaching heavy metals. We're seeing lead levels increase from individuals significantly using just as regular users. And typically we don't see that. We haven't seen lead levels increase, I would say, for the past 9 years. And over the last 2 years, we saw an elevation in youth primarily.
Some of the ads that our youth are seeing are on social media platforms, and so whether that's Facebook or Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is, they are being targeted. So we don't see those same ads because our age is filtered out, but they're targeting our youth. And so some of these are examples that have been pulled, mostly the jewel ones, but you can see they're kind of using fun, bright colors, fun shapes, young women to kind of sell their product. So the top middle picture is just a pile of candy, but then also mixed in there as well as e-liquid juices. And so you can kind of see that the packaging is very similar. They use the same color scheme when it comes to candy wrappers, and so it's hard to tell like what one is actually like the Airhead package, but what also is the e-cigarette packaging as well. And on the bottom is a picture from a convenience store, and so you can kind of see on the counter that, you know, it has the cases of different things you can purchase. But right next to that is the jewel case, but right next to that is the candy case, or candy. And so if you're going into a convenience store and you have young children, like that's right at their eye level. So yes, they're probably seeing the candy, but they're also being exposed to e-cigarette devices and they don't even know it.
Another thing too is that as students leave high school and go to college, they have that autonomy to make their own choices, right? And so we're also seeing different marketing around candy vapes. And so it's hard to see this to-do list here, but it basically talks about studying, grocery shopping, and making time to vape and relax. And we do ask students why or what is the purpose that they vape, and some do say that it's to relax because they're under a lot of stress. And they may think that and start that way and have that perception, but that addiction really kind of comes into play fast.
So getting some of the data, so in the last report, there was 90% of students in middle school and high school report seeing an e-cigarette promotion within a 30-day period. And so that can be on social media, that can be in print, on the radio, But within a 30-day period, 90% of students that took the survey have reported seeing an ad. E-cigarettes are not held to the same standards as big tobacco, so they are able to advertise on the radio, in the print, and on social media. So that's something we have to be cautious with too. Juul is the most popular. It's been on the market for the last few years here. But its popularity is because it's small. It looks like a flash drive. It has a high level of nicotine in the pods, and each pod has about 5% of nicotine, which is the highest on the market currently. And so depending on how long someone is taking a drag on that Juul, it's hard to say exactly how much nicotine they are actually consuming. And of course the pods come in fun flavors, and so they're not actually feeling the traditional tobacco. Like, you know, it's either mango or it's like a cool mint. They have multiple different flavors that draws the youth to them.
And so when we ask students, how many cigarettes do you think is in a pod, or how many pods do you go through a day? The number one response is about 2 to 3 pods a day. And so really, if you look here, so we have a regular pack of cigarettes, which is 20 cigarettes, and then we have a Juul pod, which is about 41 cigarettes, right? So take a second and think about this. Traditional cigarettes are healthier than vaping. So let that sink in for a second. So if we look at that and we kind of look at some of the information Jeni just shared with us, at 41 cigarettes at 5%, they're directly getting that 5% within that delivery system. Okay, it's delivered to the brain instantly. Whereas when a traditional cigarette is lit, they're only consuming about 1%, right? Because it burns off and a variety of other chemicals are filtered through that. So most individuals are very amazed by that. We have the fixed pods, which are about 75 cigarettes, and then the soaring pods, which are about 90 cigarettes. And these are the most popular on the market. So if you can imagine, as that addiction happens very, very quickly, we're seeing individuals that, have smoked a pack a day of traditional cigarettes for 20, 30 years, right? And they can quit cold turkey. But then we have individuals who are getting addicted to e-cigarettes very, very quickly, and they don't even know how much they're consuming. And then they try to quit. We're seeing heart attacks, we're seeing stroke, in patients among, 18 all the way down to 15. So it is very, very risky, but we just need to have those conversations, right? How many of you guys knew how many cigarettes were in a pack or a pod? A couple heads down? Yeah, it's very surprising, and they're very small. So this is how small they are. Right, so I could just put it in my pocket and use that. So definitely a little bit of a challenge. So recommendations for school staff or parents or for youth-oriented groups is just get educated. We do this every day, and we still feel like there's a ton of research out there that's untouched. And because this has been so exacerbated, there's new devices that come out on the market monthly. And also, too, there's new flavor mixings. So if you look here, this is a flavor mixing that somebody used and sold on Facebook Marketplace. And so we wouldn't necessarily know what's in that, right? And so we're seeing this in schools, and we're seeing individuals try to mix their own, which can be very, very dangerous because a lot of these chemicals, they can be found in bathroom cleaners. They can be found in formaldehyde, benzene, which is car exhaust. And individuals are vaping these products right into their lungs. And so when we talk about just development or implementing any sort of policies, procedures, we can do that at not only the school level, we can do that at the city, at the county level, but also at the state level. And it takes all of us to champion that. And then recommendations for parents or mentors. It is challenging to have a conversation about something we might not feel comfortable about or know anything about. There are so many different devices, like Jeni said, that you might not even know what you're looking for if you're looking in your backpack. Most individuals will say, yeah, I found a Juul pod at the bottom of my washer. What does that look like? How do they work? And so really it comes down to learning about the different types, but then also going back to that e-cigarette argument and really knowing the risks, that it's not just water vapor and that there is nicotine in there, and then setting a positive example for tobacco-free spaces.
So what we can do, and we do this every day for our job, but supporting policies, so whether that's in a school or workplaces or state policies. We were fortunate enough on August 1st, e-cigarettes are no longer allowed to be used indoors. They are part of the Clean Indoor Air Act. We have a high tobacco tax in Minnesota, so that kind of helps offset some of those costs. But also keeping cessation lines, so the quit plan funded at the state level. So just having these resources available. Tobacco 21 has been talked about at the state level for the last year or so too. And there's a bunch of cities and counties that have passed that on their own as well. But kind of keeping these devices out of the hands of our youth and working towards that.
So with trends, I really want to touch on a little bit of the cessation piece. Jeni talked a little bit about what we can do to support policies, but also to know that there are a variety of resources just within your own community. We are lucky that Essential Care kind of touches all of our county, and recently they have transitioned their providers to become tobacco treatment specialists. And so that's really important because, like I mentioned before, the cessation for traditional tobacco and e-cigarettes are completely different. We know that a lot of times individuals may not know that they're addicted, but it's important that we give them the help that they need and early. So a couple of years ago, we saw the Truth Initiative really step forward and hold, a little bit of accountability in saying we really need to have some conversation about this and education. And that was with the third generation mods, the big battery cartridges. And that was because a lot of those heating coils were getting too hot and they were exploding as individuals were using them. And so if you can imagine the chemicals that are in these products, they really can burn skin off very, very quickly. Individuals can develop atopic dermatitis. But also too, one thing that's not primarily talked about is secondhand and third-hand exposure. So again, if an individual chooses not to vape, that's where kind of the Clean Indoor Air Act steps in, as Jeni mentioned. And so just because an individual chooses not to use, they're still exposed to secondhand vape because it can be absorbed through the skin very, very quickly, and our skin is the largest organ of the body. Also too, if individuals use in the car or if they use in other spaces where it can leave residue on surfaces, it can still be picked up and absorbed that way as well. Lastly, when we talk a little bit about quitting, so the Real Cost was launched by the FDA, but also too, they've partnered now with Truth Initiative. And so if you have youth who have questions about this, or if you have individuals that may be seeking help to quit or learn more information about how it may be affecting them, they actually have a text line now. It's completely free, it's completely anonymous, and they can actually get connected with a professional that works in this area around cessation, and they get them connected to additional resources within their community as well. So it really is a nice partnership. Jeni mentioned Tobacco 21. How many of you guys have heard a little bit about this in the news? We've been talking about it kind of on a national level, on a state level, on a county level, on a city level, and we know that these devices cannot be used in things like schools, government buildings, licensed daycare facilities, which all make sense, but again, we're kind of missing the gap when we talk about access. And so really, we see a variety of localities across the state. We're at 53, and we foresee that becoming higher and higher as the days pass. So again, kind of championing that and making sure that we're educated with some of the policies that we can contribute to. And then lastly, again, typically when we talk with students, we say, it's not our job to stand up here and tell you what to do or what not to do, but it is our job to help educate so you can make informed choices. And really, it's all about knowing the risks. So when we talk about the chemicals, the construction of the devices, all of those different things, we see brain risk, we see addiction, we see behavioral risks in young individuals who may be sitting in your classes or at home that should be able to focus on schoolwork, but they're too worried on when they're going to get that next hit. And then, of course, the aerosol and the other chemicals. So again, it's not only the chemical, but it's the construction of the device and also that addiction piece. So it is difficult, right? It's very, very difficult for parents, for teachers, I think for youth as well. We kind of live in a world where it's instant gratification and things are very on trend. Individuals want to feel like they fit with a particular group. But we're seeing the severe consequences of this, and they're very rapidly being exacerbated. So it's important to know that and have the conversation. What questions do you guys have? Or comments? Questions, comments, yes. Do you have the mic? Try that.
Okay, thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. I'm Benny McWilliams. I own the E-Cig Lounge in Ridley Park and in Monticello and Rogers, just for promotional purposes, but I'm on both sides of the fence on it. As a parent, as an adult, as a consumer, ex-smoker, that E-Cigs worked for me is why the passion became the reality. If I would have known there'd be so much work on educating on my part of it, I don't know if I'd have done it, to be honest with you, just like everywhere, DC and all kinds of stuff. And 6 years I've been in business. We've never failed a compliance check, not once. I have 3 locations. We've never mixed our own liquids. They've always, since day one, have been manufactured in an ISO 6 clean room. And I've traveled to these clean rooms to personally take a look at each and every one of those products that are being produced. The companies I do work with are making sure that their quality products get better with time and science and research. So all the popcorn lung stuff from the casino, it was found in buttered popcorn. That was a isolated situation with people that worked in a popcorn plant for multiple years, and also were smokers. So it's kind of hard to vary out some of those studies. It's really difficult because I want to understand more of it, so I always track down the actual where the whole thing's coming from to make sure. Because I honestly, truly believe that they will maybe find something wrong with the product someday that'll really stick, because you're breathing something into your lungs. So we've never once used the word healthy in our shop. It's in my training course, which 12 weeks of training before you even go to a customer. I can't say no one's been in and bought their friend something, because how do you police that? I mean, if we see someone come in and there's a carload of people, our staff will refuse that service. And if you're a non-smoker and you're coming in for an e-cig, we try to do everything we can to talk them out of that. And the Juul, I know people that invented that product, sold it to big tobacco, unfortunately. It was originally designed for adults.
Right.
Like the businessman and woman that didn't want to look like the skateboarder chucking out huge clouds with this big device. It was meant for the guy that might actually be considering quitting smoking and just another alternative to try. And I'm not here to just defend my business, but I hear these things and it sometimes bothers me because I'm on the other side really researching too. I leave tomorrow for another state, and there's been a lot of sacrifices with that to defend it. If I find something wrong with our products, I'm going to shut it down or remove it. And that's my word. And being a part of our community that I am involved in. And I work alongside, I went to Washington, D.C. with Dave Berger, and I know Santos and stuff, and they're good people, and we're trying to work together. I've been approached on how can we work together. I would love nothing more than that, ever. And our goal is to get people off even the e-cig in 120 days. So I'm doing a study right now, and we're doing our data, collecting our data, and it's working because it has. Our goal is to basically work myself out of business kind of thing, but if you think about it, there's always going to be a referral from that 87-year-old lady that's came into my shop that smoked for 55 years, you know, or stage 4 people that we pro bono everything too, because we do care. I know it's a better than. I wish the schools would let me talk at the schools, but I get refused, you know, to be able to do something like this, and I really want to work alongside that. I don't want this stuff in the schools or anything like that. I really don't, and if you're old enough to purchase the product, be sure to use it for your purpose then, because you have that choice to do whatever then, you know. And so I get some of it, and I hope that the truth of everything does work out, because I know they're better, man. It really is. And the stuff that's up there with the bags and stuff like that's crazy. Like that to me is insane. And I got a lot of friends down in the chamber with, and they've come to me because they have found some of the things in their kids' stuff that aren't old enough. And instead of like scolding me, they've come to me and say, hey, can you get any ideas on how I can like talk to my kid about this? Because I don't want them doing it. You know, they're grounded right now. And I'll go over to their house and be like, hey, you know, stuff like that. So really, it's not everybody, and all the companies I'm working for are trying to do it with the marketing and stuff like that as not something that's advertising to children. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So I apologize if I've taken any time, and if anyone ever wants to come to my shop, please feel free. I know you guys probably already have, and that's fine. I'm honored to have you guys anytime.
Absolutely, no, I think that's great. It's great to have those conversations because really the goal is not to hurt economic development, right? It would be like saying, alcohol's not good for you, let's shut down all the liquor stores. If people are educated and can make informed choices, absolutely. Really what the problem is again, selling. Youth selling to each other or underage, that lack of perceived harm, and really not knowing where the adverse health effects lie, and really kind of focusing on those policies. So absolutely, it's good to have those.
I think too, though, the important thing to remember though is nicotine's a pesticide. So, when people are smoking a cigarette, when they're vaping, any of that, it's a pesticide that they're putting into their lungs, and pesticides kill. So, I think it's just good to kind of keep that in mind, and it's better for kids just not to even go that route. And so I think it's important that you just make sure you talk to your kids when they're young, because like you said, they can walk through a store and it's right there next to the Reese's Pieces. And so if you don't have those conversations with your kids, they're going to just be more susceptible to it. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you're going to argue with me, but.
Oh, any question? Oh.
So as the kid, the other thing is I've made it very clear in my life that I don't want any part of it, but my peers don't always make those same decisions. So when they make that decision of vaping or doing something like that, and then they breathe it out, I'm inhaling that. And you can get away from it as much as you can, but it's still always going to be around you. So even though I made the choice not to do it, I'm still getting the effect, the bad effects from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Great points. If we have a rebuttal, we can also have conversation afterwards as well. I just want to get to everybody's questions.
All right, so one quick thing. Nicotine is not a pesticide. It comes from potatoes and eggplants, so it's actually a clean thing. The question I have for you is, I have 3 children that are 16, 14, and 13, and I obviously work at a vape shop. I'm not here to argue my points with you on that. I do believe what you're doing is good. I think that there's a lot of things out there that parents do need to be educated about e-cigarettes. I smoked for 16 years. I have successfully not had a cigarette in over 6 years. I started on 16 milligrams of nicotine. I'm down to 1.5 milligrams of nicotine, and starting next month, I will be on 0 milligrams of nicotine, which does not contain nicotine. But my biggest thing is that I came in a little late. When you guys, obviously this all spurred from all the news going on with the e-cigarettes and the health concerns. Did you guys touch at all on the vitamin B acetate that is being put into illegal THC cartridges, which are being sold everywhere, which now has caused the epidemic, which has now brought you guys to this school? Which I would like to know that, I do know that 80% of all cases have been proven that it is involved with THC, not nicotine, and you had up there that everybody that had a case had used e-liquid. YouTube has a video of the first guy that came out and said this news story was wrong. He never used nicotine or e-liquid. He only vaped THC, and that's where he got his first case of sickness. I just want to make sure that everybody's knowing what's going on, and I'm strongly for making sure it stays out. And honestly, I helped fight for T21 to stop it. I really think it is actually a beneficial thing now to help that. My main concern that I do want to bring up though is, do you think if the age of 21 is there, do you think this would stop?
Well, I don't think that that's the point. It's really about the access, right? So individuals are having increased access because they're getting it from their friends and schools and things like that. I also think too, there are a lot of different retailers or people that are, selling on Facebook Marketplace, things like that are mixing their own chemicals.
Regulations, we support regulations.
Absolutely.
He's got students, his kids are students,
Yeah.
Yeah. Regulate, they start pushing some underground dirtier products there.
Which we're seeing happen.
they feel that clients ban the crap out of them. I mean, I go to shops all the time and ask why.
Yeah, but I think it's also to note that there's a variety of evidence-based research and blood testing and clinical testing that come along with some of those things. So there are a ton of information with nicotine, with using the difference between salts and juices, the delivery systems, the cartridges. Absolutely.
UK didn't want them in their countries. That liquids are not. They don't have this oil powder and all that. But now they're prescribing it in their cheese. And there's actually 2 vape shops in a hospital that probably get really big even if they're not.
In the United States? Yeah, so not in the United States, yeah, which is how we look at research, just a bit different.
But the scientists also prove that cigarettes are good.
Right, but if somebody is getting about 1% of nicotine per inhalation versus 5% of nicotine, that's quite a bit different when we're talking about kids and addiction. But, great point.
Vaping always release like a vapor cloud. I mean, how can you tell if a student is vaping in class or at home and you don't see? Or what are some of the symptoms that students will exhibit? Is it like more irritability, different things? So what as parents and teachers can we be looking out for in our classrooms?
Yeah, Jeni and I get this question a lot, and really everything that you mentioned is accurate, right? So when we talk about nicotine, we talk about irritability, withdrawal symptoms of youth that may not necessarily know that they have an addiction issue, but if you are using, a modular pod, right, so a Juul, let's say, and you can hold your breath for about 3 seconds, that cloud or that vapor will dissipate. So you're not necessarily going to be releasing a huge cloud like some of these older modules. So that might not necessarily be the case, but if you smell things, like a fruity flavor here and there, or if you smell laundry per se, like if you're doing laundry, you can also get a whiff of some of the flavors, like strawberry or mango, if you're concerned that somebody is using. One thing that we are seeing with youth who maybe have had multiple citations or have just gotten in trouble per se in schools is the Zen pods that just came out. So they're advertised as tobacco-free, but they do still have nicotine in them. They're spitless, they're white, they do look like chewing gum. So again, maybe somebody might not necessarily think twice. We're seeing a lot of students use those during the day so they can get nicotine and then vape outside of school. They're called Zen pods. We can show you at the end, but it basically like traditional tobacco, like snus. They're white, but they're spitless. So we've been asking youth, a lot of youth prefer those. Does that answer your question a little bit?
As a mom, you all know who I am, if you can see who I am. I have a daughter that vapes. And one sign that we discovered is right in her car with her. You cannot see when the sun hits that window. She could run over somebody. I mean, when that sun shines, it's like, whoa, there is no view out her window because it causes a film. And that's scary. I mean, I don't know. She's come to me several times. I swear, Mom, this is my last one. And it never is. What do? They're 19. They know everything. And it's sad.
Yeah, very hard.
Earlier, like during the presentation, you said it's like similar to like breathing in car fumes. Is there like actual like metals like that have been found in there? Like what kind of stuff is like actually in there?
So in the chemicals, like that individuals are vaping, so every chemical is going to be a little bit different depending on what you're purchasing. But also too, really the heavy metals are coming from that heating mechanism in the cartridge.
So like they're like breathing in metal?
It's going into the body, yes, yeah. So we talked a little bit about diacetyl, and so diacetyl is basically used as a similar preservative. There were studies that actually it came out in a plant where we were talking a little bit about how popcorn lung was developed, and so we're seeing some very similar cases in that because the chemicals are utilized in a lot of the flavorings. Great questions.
So the lungs regenerate?
So what we're seeing in a lot of clinical studies for individuals that come in with severe lung injuries, they're not able to repair themselves, unlike traditional smokers. So as traditional or combustible cigarettes are used, the body is this amazing machine where if you just continue use, the heart rate goes down, the blood pressure begins to regulate, and it almost starts to repair itself as if one never smoked. But because of the chemicals in a lot of these products, we're not necessarily seeing that at all.
Is there any push to standardize the look of them? Because the way I see it is if you're making it look like a pack of gum, if you're making it look like a USB drive, if you're making it look like a pen, you're kind of marketing a particular age group.
Absolutely.
To make it discreet, because if I'm an adult and I'm legal, I shouldn't have to hide it.
Absolutely, right, you can make that choice. So when we hear information from FDA and a lack of regulation, the challenge with that is that nothing currently is regulated, and so they've talked about potentially pulling or banning all of the flavors, potentially besides mint and menthol. But again, like we had talked earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stop, but you might see a little bit less of it primarily within the youth. Yeah.
So what does a Surgeon General stand on this?
So because of the evidence-based research that has come out, and he is a medical doctor, and he's seen some of this firsthand. We were just at a national conference with him. And again, the goal is not really to impact economic development, right? So we know that, with vape shops and things like that, that's your livelihood. And we understand that. But again, it's really protecting the overall health of the youth, and so that's where he stands. And potentially forcing FDA to stand up and regulate some of these issues with flavorings, chemicals, and just devices. Absolutely. Any other questions? These are great.
So on the packaging, do they have Surgeon General warnings on, like they do cigarettes?
Yep, so there's packaging, and if you want to come up, we can show you some of them. But yes, anything that contains nicotine is required to have that packaging, or that marketing on the packaging as well.
When we're finding these in our backpacks and everything else like that, is there a way that we can look at it and go, okay, yeah, this is THC, or this is just nicotine, or this is this, just by looking at it? Or do you have to ask the kids, or what?
So the question was, can you tell if there's THC in there? And the hard part is a lot of it looks very similar, right? So a lot of it looks very similar to, the e-liquid that's used. So you can test it. The kits are a little bit expensive, but again, I'm not sure if a parent is really going to purchase the kit every time, or a teacher, or a lot of times law enforcement will do it if they're repeat offenders. But again, it's really hard to know. So if somebody or a student gets caught with that, it's really somebody else deciding, do we test it? Do we not? It really is, it's too hard to tell.
So going back to our principal, do you know what most of the kids are getting into or not?
Well, it's been a variety. I would say that as a parent, if you're wondering what something looks like, one thing that we are finding pretty much on every student who has been in possession is that they have a portable phone charger or a portable charger with them, and that's what they're using during the day to charge their device. And we've had cases where the devices have really been hot-wired in a bathroom, and so that's something to look out for too. Is there always seems to be some type of a battery charger that they're using.
Yeah, and a lot of the devices do come with that more USB accessible charging mechanism, right? I think that's really how a lot of things are charged right now and becoming more universal. Do you have a question?
Well, my question is, I thought THC, is that what you said? I thought that was illegal. How do they get it in the school? Are these people under the age of 21? I mean, do they order it, or do they mix it themselves, or is it something readily available? And how much does this stuff cost that they have that kind of disposable income?
Right, so kind of a variety of factors. So one, a lot of students sometimes that are getting caught with these devices, they're not sure if it's just an e-liquid or juice or if it does contain THC or not. So that really is the challenge. We were talking with a school resource officer from the city, and actually they tested something that was sold without the intention to sell, and they found out that it was THC. And so obviously THC is not legalized here. So again, are individuals getting it somewhere else and bringing it in? Are they getting it from somebody who ordered it from somewhere else and brought it back? And it really is too hard to know, because you can, pretty much get it anywhere. CBD, right? So again, CBD oil, a lot of times it's going to be advertised as 0% THC, and that is legal, right? Because that doesn't have anything in it. But also, how would you know if it's not tested? So that's also kind of a question to ask. But as far as cost, really, Jeni, do you want to talk a little bit about the cost with some of the devices?
Yeah, they kind of vary depending on the size, but usually like the Jewel, you can kind of get at a convenience store roughly for about $39.99. There's usually a price promotion. The pods come in packs of 4. They are roughly about $14.99 for this. Some of these devices are much cheaper, like $9.99, also with a coupon sometimes. Some of the bigger ones, the Mod Pods, can be upwards to $50, $75 depending on where they're purchased as well. So there is a wide variety of pricing, and e-juices also kind of vary on pricing as well.
Are they single use?
Most of them, well, the pod is changeable, or like these, you just refill, so it's reusable. I think all the ones that we have up here are reusable.
So in your studies, with I guess the younger generation, I'll take the example of that girl that had went in for the popcorn lung. How long was she vaping for before they actually had seen the changes in the lungs? Like say, per se, like a student or that person had already had some lung issues as a child and has a chronic pneumonia kind of deal. Obviously, if they're smoking or they're vaping, it's going to be horrendous for them in their lungs. But typically, if a healthy, normal youth, how long do they have to vape for that to happen, I guess is what the question is.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so with that particular case, so this individual had been vaping for 2.5 months on a regular basis, primarily Juul as well. And so every case is really different. So as Jeni said earlier, it depends on how many puffs, right, or how long they're hitting that. And really, that's the percentage of nicotine that they're inhaling. So again, it really would kind of, I think it would depend, but this individual had no prior health conditions or symptoms of anything asthma-like prior to that. So had gone in for a cough, thinking that it could have been bronchiolitis, but also to nasal drip and everything like that. So again, it really is different, but that was just one particular case that we saw that was exacerbated by that because she was so young and also to, about 2 months. And actually, the question was, so the provider asked, how do you know it's only 2 months or how often? Because sometimes, if an individual is using, they'll say, I only tried it 1 or 2 times, But anyway, so in that narrative of the data, the individual was able to track back when that device was purchased and when it was used. So yeah, they were able to kind of get that a little bit of a timeline.
Just out of curiosity, I know one of the things that they did to try to reduce cigarette smoking is they, completely increase the price of cigarettes. I mean, I remember, when I was a kid, you could buy cigarettes for $2 a pack, and now the price is significantly higher. Is there any, regulation or any kind of push or movement to try to get these things so that the cost is just higher to try to stop some of, people being able to, access it?
Yeah, and so in some cities and counties, they've talked about that, and they've actually written that into their ordinance, where they don't allow couponing or things like that. However, in place right now, there isn't any regulation as far as cost. Yeah. Okay. Well, we want to thank you guys so much for coming, and if you do have questions or comments, we'd love to answer them. We invite you to kind of come down and, look at some of the devices that we have if you want to become more familiar with them. And other than that, thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate it.